Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cherno and welcome to the very first release of the Sparky engine. So this video, we're basically just going to talk about exactly everything that's going into this release. I'm very excited. This is the first release of the Sparky engine. It's still incredibly early in development, but it's come up to a point where I can actually kind of release it. And since I've been kind of managing it on the version and control system rather than Git as well, this kind of more or less signifies me actually pushing the code to Git than an actual kind of like public release, so to speak. But anyway, I'm still calling it a release. I'm going to do one of these every month. I'm going to try and do one of these every month, if not every 2 months. But this is the March 2016 release. We're just going to go ahead and look through the release notes, and I'm going to kind of commentate them and just discuss them a little bit. And I'm going to talk a bit more about everything else that's kind of going to happen with the future as well. So right now, I'm literally uploading the code to GitHub. Now it's pretty big and I live in Australia, so my upload speed is, well, not great. So because of that, it's just going to take too long. And I mean, ideally I would have done this video after it was already on GitHub, but not, I don't have time, unfortunately, to wait for this to happen. But it is uploading right now. By the time you actually see this, it will already be up on GitHub. Because obviously I'm going to upload this before I upload the video. So if you do head on over to github.com/thecherno/Sparky, link will be in the description. You should see all the code for the Sparky engine, all the up-to-date code, everything that I've written up to this point in time will be here. Okay. The first thing you're going to want to do is look at these release notes. We're actually going to go through them in this video, so you can probably watch the video instead. But they will be in a folder called Documents or Docs, and then Release Notes in the main kind of thing here. But yeah, the main things that I want to say with this release, and the major new thing that I'm kind of opening up, is pull requests. Right? I've up to this point in time, I haven't actually accepted a single pull request. But from now on, as soon as this code goes live, I will be accepting pull requests. And I really want you guys to help me write this engine, because it's obviously a massive task to write a game engine. And there's no way I can do it by myself, especially when you take into consideration all the little bugs and little tweaks everywhere that need work on, as well as like other platforms and all of this kind of stuff. There are just so many things that need to get added, so little time. Certainly in my life, there's very little time. But not only that, but there's just like one person cannot write a game engine, right? So I really want to open this up to be more of a community thing. So if you do want to contribute to Sparky, I'm going to actually make a video probably sometime next week that will cover the details of contributing to Sparky and how you can do that. But if you can be bothered working that out yourself, you literally can just open new pull requests with things that you think are fixes or improvements or new features, whatever. And I'll look through them. I'll probably comment on them if you like make a mistake, or if I don't agree with it or something. I'll definitely like comment on them, and we'll have some kind of discussion as well. I'll probably close all these ones. They're incredibly old. Some of these actually aren't too bad, like February 1, but a lot of them are from last year. So I really do need to kind of close them. But that's the big thing, right? I really want this to be a community thing. We need to write this engine together, and I'll definitely be taking a look at pull requests and accepting your code. Okay, cool. So that's kind of step one, the first thing that I wanted to talk about. There's also going to be a release on GitHub as well. If you go into releases and download it, you should be able to run the engine on Windows, or run, I guess, with all the binaries for the engine. This will include Sandbox as well, so you should be able to run that. But that's another thing that will happen as soon as this thing uploads. You can see it's going to take forever. But that's the idea. Okay, so that's the big thing. Now that that's out of the way, we can talk about stuff like the actual release notes, and I can kind of give you guys a tour of what's new. So I'm just going to go through this list pretty quickly and see what's new. So the major new features are basically that Sparky now supports physically based rendering. At the beginning, so at the previous Git commit, we basically just had a very basic 3D renderer. We didn't have really much in there. We definitely didn't have any kind of physically based rendering. I believe the lighting model was just kind of your standard diffuse kind of, I've forgotten the exact term for it, but it's just kind of normal based lighting. Like that's pretty much all we had in there. It was very, very basic. We had very primitive kind of 3D rendering. So now we have a proper 3D renderer, proper 3D forward renderer, and in fact, one that supports physically based like shading. and all that stuff, physically based rendering and all that stuff, right? We also support both OpenGL and DirectX. So before we only supported OpenGL, and the all of the graphics, all of the engine really was written in a way to only support OpenGL. So now it's basically most of the code is API independent, which is good, which means that if we want to add another rendering API such as Vulkan or maybe Metal or anything else really, that's going to be a lot easier now, because it's really as simple as just hooking everything up with a new API and that's it. Like most of the engine is written in an API independent way, and also in a platform independent way as well. We only support Windows right now, but when we do support more platforms, again, that will be easy. But that's besides the point, right? API independent. So now we can support OpenGL and DirectX 11, Direct3D 11, and we do support that. And the sandbox will run on both of these, which is fantastic, with physically based rendering as well, which is great. Sparky now has a custom 3D model format. It's a .spm file, right? Looks like that. So this is a model. This is a Sparky model file. If you see these around, the way that you build them is you use your 3D program of your 3D modeling application of choice, whether that be Blender or Autodesk Maya or Autodesk 3D Studio Max, right? Anything. From those tools, you can export something called an FBX file, which is an Autodesk kind of format. It's kind of an open format though. Like all of the API is up there on the internet that you can just use it. You don't need like a license for it or anything. You just need to state that you're using it. That's it. So you can easily integrate that into, I don't know, anything that you're using. But FBX is a very good intermediate model format for 3D models because it's very complete. It supports pretty much everything. That's why I chose to, do this specifically. It supports anything. It supports anything really, from like blending, like morph targets and stuff, and like skeletal animation, bones, and just everything really that you could imagine. Any kind of vertex attributes. It's very, very powerful. It supports this whole node-based kind of hierarchy. And it's just a very complete model format that has everything you could possibly want. So it's perfect to choose for this. So what you do is you use the build tool. You basically feed into the build tool an FBX file, and it will output an SPM file for you. And so far, I haven't made anything that makes it crash yet. You will need to make sure that the FBX file has certain vertex attributes. So basically, apart from the regular ones, which is like position, UVs, and normals, you'll also need to make sure that any 3D model that you export has tangents and binormals, okay? Because they're required for physically based rendering, or, well, more specifically, they're required for normal mapping, right? So, and SPM, like the build tool will enforce that. Like it will tell you if you don't have them, like they're required. So that's really the only thing though, but you should be able to feed it any FBX model. Multiple meshes and stuff don't work yet. SPM is actually really, really primitive. I wrote this in a single day, and in fact, narrowing that down, I wrote this in about 4 hours, this whole SPM file format. So it's very, very young, right? And it doesn't support much at all. And I'll definitely work on that probably sometime in the future, but for now, it's actually not bad. We've got custom memory allocation control. What I mean by that is I've overloaded the new and delete operators, and I'm forwarding them into an allocator class so that we can track allocations, and in the future, we can control where the memory gets allocated from. Okay, so right now it's just tracking memory statistics, but in the future, it will also probably control, the actual allocation. And then finally, I've converted all the matrix maths to be row major. So it used to be column major, OpenGL style, but now it's row major, which is kind of more DirectX style. And we will probably see some performance improvements from that change when I actually properly, when I actually start optimizing the maths library, which isn't yet. Okay, cool. So the full list. Well, I kind of got to just gloss through this really quickly. So, OpenGL DirectX, yep, refactored entire engine to support multiple rendering APIs. FreeTypeGL, yeah, so that's another thing. FreeTypeGL, which is a project which is actually on GitHub. It's an open source project that basically it takes the rasterized pixels from FreeType and actually formats them properly into an OpenGL texture. So it actually packs like all of the individual glyphs into a texture atlas or a sprite sheet, whatever you want to call it. And so that's what we use FreeTypeGL for. So before, FreeTypeGL, at least the project that's on GitHub, used to actually just make the OpenGL texture. I've changed it so that it actually gives us access to an array of pixels. And then I've moved it so that instead of FreeTypeGL generating OpenGL textures, we actually feed those pixels into Sparky's texture classes, and they're API independent. So basically, I've made FreeTypeGL work with DirectX and OpenGL and anything really. So I've kind of I've really changed this to just provide me with a packed texture in the form of a bunch of pixels, and that's it. A few bugs that I've fixed here. Sometimes the close button, like the red X close button, didn't actually close the window for some reason. So I've fixed that bug. This was ages ago. Mouse releasing, so sometimes like if you click on the window and then you kind of drag the mouse out of the window and then you release the mouse, the release event wouldn't get registered because the mouse wasn't getting kind of captured when you clicked. So that would lead to like the debug menu when you were scrolling, when you were using the slider, for example, you'd click drag up and then you would release the mouse to stop. But then when you kind of drag the mouse back into the window, even though your mouse button wasn't pressed, it would still the slider would still follow the mouse because it thought it was still clicked because there was no release event. So I fixed that bug. Window focus and resize events. So now you can actually, in the event system, you can actually see if a window loses or gains focus and whether or not the window resizes. And I'm propagating those resize events to the renderer so that they know that the viewport size has changed. Yeah, PBR is in, normal mapping for PBR is in. So the PBR models that I'm using are Disney Diffuse and GGX. They're slightly modified, I've slightly changed them. But they're basically based on Frostbite's physically based rendering paper, which is about 120 pages. It's very good. It's on the internet, if you can find it. I will eventually make a video on physically based rendering. And when I do that, I'm going to cover everything in detail because I know a lot of people are interested in this. I just don't have time right now. But don't worry, that'll be like an hour or two video probably, specifically on the topic. Image-based lighting for PBR as well. So basically, this is like environment kind of lighting where the lighting depends on an image, which is kind of your cube map, your environment. That's extremely important for PBR because your lighting obviously should be based on your surroundings. Depth textures, basic shadow rendering. This is again obsolete, so not even worth mentioning. Deferred rendering, like the code for this is technically in the engine, but it's really bad and it doesn't work. So I've added like this is in the changelog or the release notes because the code is physically there. Like there's a class, there's like a deferred renderer, there's deferred renderer.h and .cpp, but they don't actually work. Okay, they did at one point, but anyway. So yeah, custom model format for meshes, the build tool for FBX to SPM conversion. PBR material. So now there's material and PBR material, which is just PBR material just gives you access to methods such as set environment map and set gloss map, set like normal map, set diffuse map or whatever, set albedo map, and set specular map, all that kind of stuff, right? So you can set the textures. Instead of having to set the uniforms and know the uniform names and all that, just really for convenience, I think. And it automatically sets the pre-integrated FG texture as well, which is a topic for another video. Cube map, so yeah, the engine now supports texture cubes, of course, which is important for image-based lighting. Material render flags, so you can tell materials how you want them to render. So, for example, should the renderer render this with depth testing on or off? How should the renderer blend? Right now, it literally just supports depth testing, which was important for the skybox to work, but it basically will include stuff like blend modes. Uniform struct alignment, so like the light struct, for example, is 16-byte aligned because it has to be. I mean, it doesn't really like have to be, but it should be. In fact, most of these data structures should actually be 16-byte aligned. Or so, right? In fact, like structs, for example, in structs in HLSL actually do have to literally have padding in them to ensure that certain members are like aligned up to the size of the maximum member, so to speak, which is usually about 16 bytes. So for example, if you have a vec3 and then a vec4, you can't do that. You have to have a vec3, then like a float of padding, and then a vec4. Anyway, topic for another video probably in terms of in-depth. Renderer class. So yes, you have a renderer class so that you can control stuff that isn't like specific to say the batch renderer or the forward renderer, but stuff that is actually rendering API more like, so like depth testing, blend modes. Free image is now part of the solution. It used to just be an external library. Now it's actually being compiled so that we get access to free image utilities because we didn't before. And that's also compiling as a static library, so you don't need the DLL. Okay, so created render API, independent blend modes, and buffer types. What does that mean? Yeah, so basically there are just like Sparky has its own its own definitions for like blend modes and buffer types. So you can, instead of having to use like, you know, GL source alpha, there is actually just like a source alpha kind of thing that later gets translated to the API dependent one when it actually gets used with the API. Buffer layouts now work with GL. Yep, so buffer layouts obviously support DirectX now. Rewrote the entire shader class. The shader class has changed a lot. I'd encourage you guys to look at that. Like how shaders work in Sparky is an entire topic for a massive video, because obviously like they're smart in the sense that like when you create a shader in Sparky from like a source file, it like the shader class knows like all the uniforms that's in it. You can give the shader just a buffer, like a byte buffer filled with data for the uniforms, and it will just set them, whether or not it would be for DirectX or OpenGL. So it's pretty amazing. And you can also ask the shader, hey shader, what uniforms do you have? And it will actually tell you. So it's really cool, and it's massive. So I'm not going to talk about it now. Forward renderer now uses system uniforms. This is so complicated. I just want to tell you guys that this stuff is just like, there is so much stuff going on here that I'm actually feeling a bit bad because there's no way I can explain all of this right now, or maybe possibly ever. So it's just, there's so much to learn from this code. I'd encourage you guys just read it like a book. Might be difficult at times, but go for it anyway. See if you can work out what some of these things are. So booleans to debug menu. So the debug menu now supports booleans, so you can be like, you can add a boolean to it and then you can toggle it via the debug menu. There's a first person camera, custom allocated class, as I said, which was up here as well, custom memory allocation and control, so we can track memory usage, as well as later actually allocate stuff. There's SP new and SP delete macros for memory management. So basically they will, SP new, for example, automatically adds the file and the line that the allocation came from. So you can track allocations that way if you really want to. There is no actual memory metrics kind of class. So the data doesn't go anywhere, but it's there. So like, it's a good idea to start introducing this now so that later there won't have to be a massive like find replace new to SP new or something. So it's, yeah. Again, this stuff is just a topic for another video. Dynamic shader reloading for OpenGL. Don't actually know if this still works, but it did at one point. The debug renderer doesn't work. That would basically just, you know, display like lines and stuff, and there's a lot of stuff to... This is fantastic. So this stuff all just failed because apparently GitHub has a file size limit of 100 meg. I don't know what I'm going to do. So FPX SDK and freeimage.lib. I guess you guys will just have to get that code elsewhere. Anyway, that's fantastic. Yeah, they're huge. Yeah, the FPX SDK things are massive. Anyway, what else do we have here? There are integer type defs now. So like instead of having to use short, char, long, because they might be compiler dependent, you now have int8, int16, int32, etc. So int8 is the same as a byte, or rather uint8 would be the same as a byte. Int32 would be the same as an int usually, and like, you know, uint32 would be the same as uint, which is the same as unsigned int. Anyway, there are a few type defs just for convenience and to make sure that we are supporting multiple platforms, multiple compilers. Yeah, the Sandbox project has a lot of resources like PBR assets and stuff. Fixed a bunch of compiler warnings here and there. Visual Studio filters should be good now as well, and Cherno is gone. And known issues, I'm sure there are a lot. I actually did not keep track of them. Open an issue on GitHub if you find any issues, and I'll try and fix them. Or someone else can fix them via a pull request. Okay, guys. So that's pretty much the end of the changelogs, or the release notes. That's what's changed. I'm going to Probably start putting up videos on how you guys can make games with this. I don't know if it's really that ready yet. I don't think I want to change the API too much. The backend will certainly change, but the API is actually, I think, pretty stable. I'm pretty happy with it. So I may start making videos on how to make games with Sparky. Let me know if you guys are interested in that. And also, what should we do for the April release, right? That is my question to you guys. Should we keep working on 3D stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot to do. Like, for example, like shadow rendering isn't even in yet, like properly. We're still missing post effects, like post-processing effects, so stuff like bloom, and like we're missing HDR buffers so that we can do like proper exposure, proper camera exposure stuff, as well as like adaptive exposure and automatic exposure like that. All that stuff is missing. What else? You know, depth of field, blur, like motion blur. There's so many effects that we could do with post effects, right? Screen space effects, of course, like screen space ambient occlusion, screen space reflections. So much stuff could be done pretty easily if only we had post effects. So, and they are technically in there, like there's a post effects class, but of course it doesn't work with the current API. Should we start working on tools such as the level editor? Yeah, I'd love to make a level editor for this, and before we do that, we need a serialization format. So much work, man. So much work. I wish I could spend more time working on Sparky, but unfortunately I can't. So that's why I'm handing it off to you guys. I'm going to obviously still keep working on it as much as possible, but I actually can't do this without you guys. So I really want your help. I'll probably put out a video on how you can start contributing to Sparky, but it would be awesome if we could form some kind of team. Like if there are people out there who are fairly competent with C++ and graphics programming, and you guys want to step up and be like quote unquote moderators of Sparky, as in like you'll have slightly more responsibility than just random people with pull requests, then I would love for some people to do that. Like obviously you'd have to know what you're talking about, so you'd have to have some experience, and you'd have to have the time to spend on Sparky as well. But if there are people out there who actually want to work on this project, then please let me know, because I need some people to help me out with this. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed, please hit the like button. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to support Sparky and you can't help actually write the code, then if you head on over to patreon.com/the Cherno, you can pledge any amount. Like $1 is fine per month. That's fine. If you guys all pledge $1, then I'm going to be a lot happier and I'm going to be able to spend a lot more time on Sparky. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.